Okay, this is Grandpa disguised as Grandma continuing. Haroun could now see that below decks the dark ship was a single voluminous, that's huge, cavern, like a cave, around which walkways ran at 7 different levels, connected by stairways and ladders, and it was full of machinery. And what machines they were! Far too complicated to describe, if murmured. What a whirring of whirrers and stirring of stirrers, what ranks of lifters and banks of sifters, what a humming of squeezers and thrumming of freezers was there. Khartoum Shud waited for them on a high catwalk. That's a walkway high up in the air along the wall, tossing but the Hoopoe's brain idly from hand to hand. No sooner had Haroun and If, and their guards, of course, reached him than he began dryly to explain everything. Haroun forced himself to listen, even though the cultmaster's voice was boring enough to send a person to sleep in 10 seconds flat. These are the poison blenders, Khartoum Shud was saying. We must make a great many poisons because each and every story in the ocean needs to be ruined in a different way. To ruin a happy story, you must make it sad. To ruin an action drama, you must make it move too slowly. To ruin a mystery, you must make the criminal's identity obvious even to the most stupid audience. To ruin a love story, you must turn it into a tale of hate. To ruin a tragedy is a very, very sad story, where a person, well, never mind, it's a very sad story. You must make it capable of inducing helpless laughter. To ruin an ocean of stories, muttered If the water genie, you must add a Khartoum Shud. Say what you like, the cult master told him. Say it while you can. He went on with his terrifying explanations. Now, the fact is that I personally have discovered that for every story there is an anti-story. I mean that every story, and so every stream of story has a shadow self. And if you pour this anti-story into the story, the two cancel each other out, and bingo, end of story. Now then, you see here the proof that I have found a way of synthesizing these anti-stories, these shadow tales. Yes, I can mix them up right here in laboratory conditions and produce a most efficient concentrated poison that none of the stories in your precious ocean can resist. These concentrated poisons are what we have been releasing one by one into the ocean. You have seen how thick the poison is here, thick as treacle. Treacle is like, it's sort of as thick as maple syrup. And it's a sugary thing. That's because all the shadow tales are packed together so closely. Gradually, they will flow out along the currents of the ocean, each anti-story seeking out its victim. Each day, we synthesize and release new poisons. Each day, we murder new tales. Soon, the ocean will be dead. Good and dead. Cold and dead. When black ice freezes over its surface, my victory will be complete. But why do you hate stories so much? Haroun blurted, feeling stunned. Stories are fun. The world, however, is not for fun, Khartoum Shud replied. The world is for controlling. Which world? Haroun made himself ask. Your world, my world, all worlds, came the reply. They are all there to be ruled, and inside every single story, inside every stream in the ocean, there lies a world, story world, that I cannot rule at all. And that is the reason why. Now the cult master pointed out the refrigeration machines that kept the poisons, the anti-stories at the necessary low temperatures. And he pointed out the filtration machines that removed all dirt and impurities from the poisons so that they were 100% pure. 100% deadly. And he explained why. As part of the manufacturing process, the poison had to spend some time in the cauldrons, remember those huge black pots, up on deck. Like all good wine, the anti-stories improve if they are permitted to breathe for a while in the open air before being released. After 11 minutes of this, Haroun stopped listening. He followed Khatum, Shud, and If along the high catwalk until they reached another part of the ship in which chupwallahs were putting together large, mysterious segments of what looked like hard black rubber. Now this, said the cult master, and something in his voice made Haroun pay attention, is where we are building the plug. What plug? Cried If, as an appalling idea took shape in his thoughts. You can't mean you will have seen the giant crane up on the deck, said Khatum Shud in his most monotonous voice. You will have noted the chains going down into the water. At the other end of those chains, chopwallah divers are rapidly assembling the largest and most efficient plug ever constructed. It is almost complete, little spies, almost complete, and so, in a few days, we shall be able to put it to good use. We are going to plug the wellspring itself, the source of the stories, which lies directly beneath this ship on the ocean bed. As long as that source remains unplugged, fresh, unpoisoned, renewing story waters will pour upwards into the ocean, and our work will only be half done. But when it's plugged, then the story will lose all its power to resist my anti-stories, and the end will come very soon. And then, Water Genie, what will there be for you guppies to do but to accept the victory of Bezaban? Never, said If, but he didn't sound very convincing. How do the divers enter the poisoned waters without being hurt? Haroun asked Khatum Shud. Khatum Shud smiled a dry little smile. Paying attention again, I see, he said. The obvious answer is they wear protective clothing. Here, in this cupboard, are numbers of poison-proof suits. He led them on, past the plug assembly zone to an area occupied by the largest machine in the entire ship. And this, said Khatum Shud, almost permitting a note of pride to enter his dull, flat voice, is our generator. What does it do? Asked Haroun, who had never been of a particularly scientific turn of mind. It is a device for converting mechanical energy into electrical energy by means of electromagnetic induction, replied Khatum Shud, if you must know. Haroun was unabashed. Means he wasn't worried about that. Do you mean it's where your power supply comes from? Precisely, the cult master replied. I see that education is not quite at a standstill on Earth. At this point, something wholly unexpected occurred. Through an open porthole a few paces from the cult master, bizarre, rooty tendrils began to enter the dark ship. They came in at a high speed, a great unformed mass of vegetation, among which was a single lilac-colored flower. Haroun's heart gave a great leap of joy. He began, but then he held his tongue. Mali had escaped capture, as Haroun later learned, by reassuming the appearance of a bunch of lifeless roots. He had floated slowly toward the dark ship and then used the suction pads on several of the tendrils which made up his body to climb up the outside of the vessel like a creeper. Now, as he completed his dramatic entry and whirled himself in a trice into his more familiar Mali shape, the alarm was sounded. Intruder, intruder, alert, intruder, intruder! Switch on the darkness, screeched Khatum Shud. his usual insipid manner falling away from him like a mask. There was an interruption. Molly began to move at high speed in the direction of the generator. Before the dark bulbs had been switched on, he had reached the gigantic machine, having eluded, that means escaped, numbers of Chapwalla guards whose eyesight wasn't what it should have been owing to the dim twilight and in spite of their really rather fashionable wraparound dark glasses. Without pausing for an instant, the floating gardener leaped up into the air, disassembling, means taking apart his body as he did so, and flung roots and tendrils all over the generator, getting into every nook and cranny of the machine. There now began a series of loud bangs and crashes as circuits blew and cogwheels broke, and the mighty generator came to a juddering halt. The ship's entire power supply was cut off at once. Stirrers stopped stirring, and whirrers stopped whirring, blenders stopped blending, and menders stopped mending, squeezers stopped squeezing, and freezers stopped freezing, poison storers stopped storing, and poison pourers stopped their pouring. The entire operation was at a standstill. "Hooray, Molly!" Haroun cheered. "Nice work, mister! Too good!" Chapwalla guards now attacked Molly in large numbers, pulling at him with their bare hands, hacking at him with axes and swords, but a creature tough enough to withstand the concentrated poison which Khatum Shud had been pouring into the ocean of stories wasn't bothered by such flea bites. He hung on to the generator until he was sure it was ruined beyond hope of quick repair, and as he clung to the machine, he began in his rough gardener's way to sing through the lilac flower that served him for a mouth. "You can chop a flower bush, you can chop a tree, you can chop liver, but you can't chop me. You can chop and change, you can chop in Karachi, you can chop suey, but you can't chop me." "Okay," Haroun told himself, seeing that Khatam Shud's attention was wholly focused on the floating gardener. "Come on, Haroun," he said to himself, "it's your turn. It's now or never." The little emergency something, the Bite-A-Light, was still hidden under his tongue. Quickly he put it between his teeth and bit. The light that poured from his mouth was as bright as the sun. The Chapwallas all around him were blinded and broke their vows of silence to shriek and utter curses as they clutched their eyes. Even Khatam Shud reeled back from the glare. Haroun moved as fast as he had ever moved in his life. He took the Bite-A-Light out of his mouth and held it over his head. Now the light poured in every direction, illuminating the entire vast interior of that massive ship. Those eggheads back at P2C2E house surely know a thing or two, Haroun thought in wonderment, but he was running now, because the seconds were ticking away. As he passed Cultmaster Khatam Shud, he stuck out his free hand and grabbed But the Hoopoe's brain box from the Cultmaster's hand. He ran on until he reached the cupboard containing the protective clothing for the Chapwalla divers. A minute had already passed. Haroun shoved But the Hoopoe's brain into a pocket of his nightshirt and began to wrestle his way into the diving suit. He had placed the Bite-A-Light on a convenient railing so that he could use both hands. "But how does this thing go on?" he groaned in frustration as the diving suit refused to slip on smoothly. Trying to pull it over a long red nightshirt with purple patches didn't exactly help. The seconds ticked away. Although he was frantically busy with the diving suit, Haroun did notice a number of things. He noticed, for example, that Khatam Shud had personally grabbed If the Water Genie by his blue whiskers. He also noticed that none of the Chapwallas had shadows. That could mean only one thing. Khatam Shud had shown him his most trusted devotees, the union of the zipped lips, how to detach themselves from their shadows just like himself. So they are all shadows here, he understood. The boat, the zipped lip gang, and Khatam Shud himself. Everything and everyone here is a shadow made solid, except for If, Molly, But the Hoopoe, and me. The third thing he noticed was this. As the brilliant light of the vital light filled the interior of the dark ship, the whole vessel seemed to quiver for a moment, to become a little less solid, a little more shadowy. And the chupwallas, too, trembled, and their edges softened, and they began to lose their three-dimensional form. If only the sun would come out, Haroun realized, they'd all melt away. They'd become flat and shapeless, like the shadows they really are. But there was no sunlight to be found anywhere in that dim twilight, and the seconds were running out. And just as the 2 minutes of light came to an end, Haroun zipped up the diving suit, pulled on the goggles, and dived headfirst out of a porthole towards the poisoned ocean. As he hit the water, a terrible feeling of hopelessness overcame him. What are you going to do, Haroun? He asked himself. Swim all the way back to Gup City? He fell through the waters of the ocean for a long, long time. And the deeper he went, the less filthy the story streams were, and the easier it was to see. He saw the plug. Teams of chupwalla divers were at work, bolting pieces onto it. Fortunately, they were too busy to notice Haroun. The plug was about the size of a football stadium and very roughly oval. Its edges were raggedy and uneven, however, because it was being constructed to fit precisely into the wellspring or source of stories, and the two shapes, plug and wellspring, had to be a perfect match. Haroun continued to fall, and then, wonder of wonders, he caught sight of the source itself. The source of stories was a hole, or chasm, or crater in the seabed, and through that hole, as Haroun watched, the glowing flow of pure, unpolluted stories came bubbling up from the very, very heart of Cathani. I can't read this. There were so many streams of story, of so many different colors, all pouring out of the source at once, that it looked like a huge underwater fountain of shining white light. In that moment, Haroun understood that if he could prevent the source from being plugged, everything would eventually be all right again. The renewed streams of stories would cleanse the polluted waters, and Katam Shu's plan would fail. Now he was at the low point of his plunge, and as he began to rise toward the surface, he thought with all his heart, "Oh, how I wish there was something I could do." At that moment, seemingly by chance, his hand brushed against the thigh of his diving suit, and he felt a bulge in the nightshirt pocket beneath. That's strange, he thought. I'm sure I put Butt the Hoopoo's brain box in the pocket on the other side. Then he remembered what was in that pocket, which had lain there, completely forgotten, ever since he first arrived on Kahani. And in a flash, he knew that there was something he could do after all. He returned to the surface with a whoosh and lifted up his goggles to take several gulps of air, while taking care not to let the poisoned waters of the ocean lap his face. As luck would have it, and it's high time I had some luck, Haroun thought, he had surfaced right next to the gangway to which the disabled Butt the Hoopoo had been tethered, that means tied, while the search party, which Katam Shud had sent out to recapture him, was heading off across the clearing toward the weed jungle, using torches fitted with dark bulbs to help them see. Long beams of absolute pitch darkness raked the weed jungle. Good, thought Haroun. I hope they search in that direction for a long time. He hauled himself out of the water onto the gangway, unzipped his diving suit, and took out Butt the Hoopoo's brain box. I'm no engineer, Hoopoo, he murmured, but let me see if I can plug this back in. The chupwallas had fortunately neglected to screw the lid of the Hoopoo's head down again. Haroun climbed aboard, but, as stealthily as he could, lifted the lid and looked inside. There were 3 loose leads, that's loose wires, inside the empty brain cavity. Haroun quickly found the 3 points on the brain box to which they had to be connected. But which went where? Oh, well, he told himself, here goes nothing, and he plugged the 3 leads in at random, just any old way. But the hoopoe emitted an alarming sequence of giggles and quacks and other strange noises. Then it burst into a weird little song. You must sing a down down, and you'll call him a down down. I've connected it up wrong, and I've sent it insane. Haroun panicked aloud. He said, Hoopoe, be quiet, please. Look, look, a mouse. Peace, peace. This piece of toasted cheese will do to it, ranted Hoopoe, but the hoopoe, nonsensically. No problem.